There was once a time not too long ago where the superhero movie was a guaranteed cash cow. But the days where movies like Aquaman or Captain Marvel are billion-dollar box office bangers are officially behind us. As distant as those days seem, it was still only a year ago when Disney last crossed the billion-dollar box office mark with their movie Deadpool and Wolverine. But since that movie came out, it has been nothing but disaster for Disney Marvel. The disaster of 2025 for Disney began with Captain America Brave New World, one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's like that because of multiple reshoots and a result of editing the movie to hell, completely torching any chance at a coherent plot within that movie. After that was my least favorite project of the year, where they brought back multiple of my favorite characters with Daredevil Born Again and completely ruined them. Then came the highly praised but barely watched pile of crap that was Thunderbolts Asterisk, a movie that I thought was alright at the time, but since then my opinion on it has only gone down as other movies have come out this year. The ending is not what I like. I think it moves super slowly, and overall it's really not that great of a movie that received a lot of praise from the few people who actually watched it. Then came the most predictable and easily to see coming disaster for Marvel, which was Ironheart, a show that they were so unconfident about that it was sitting on the shelf for years inside Marvel that they didn't want to release. And now, Marvel finds themselves with no momentum moving into 2026, where they're releasing their final big play in the form of Avengers Doomsday. But all hope is not lost, as Marvel has one final chance to get a win in 2025 with their new movie, Fantastic Four: First Steps. After watching Fantastic Four, the title of the video isn't a joke. Fully. The movie did blow my mind. Did it blow my mind because of the masterful storytelling and incredible characters? No, it didn't. It blew my mind because of the alright storytelling and decent characters. I have not been keeping my expectation of this movie a secret. I've been thinking this was going to be a disaster, whether it was because I thought Pedro Pascal was a massive miscast for Reed Richards, or the idea that the Silver Surfer is going to be female in this movie as opposed to Norrin Radd, the male version that's known most from the comics. All those things in mind, however, I actually ended up enjoying a lot more of this movie than I thought I was going to. I think the first act of this movie is really good. I think the second act is alright, but there's some problems, and the third act is complete trash. But overall, I enjoyed way more of this movie than I thought I would, and I think it's the best superhero movie of 2025. Now, that's not saying much. The bar is very low, but still, at the end of the day, somehow it managed to be the best one this year. A win is a win, I guess, for Marvel in big 2025, and they did it. They still have the best superhero movie of the year. The opening scene of the Fantastic Four: First Steps is an expositional scene from the Ted Gilbert Show, where it shows us as the Fantastic Four are saving people and fighting villains throughout their first 4 years of existence in New York City. We get to see multiple things, such as the Thing pulling a boat to shore, the Fantastic Four fighting Mole Man, that shows us why the people of the world respect and admire the Fantastic Four at this point in their careers. This is a way better way to introduce your characters than something like we saw with Superman, where our first introduction to Superman is him crash landing in the snow after being beat within an inch of his life. All of this leads to something that I do quite like about the movie that I wish was done a better job of exploring, which is the chemistry between the Fantastic Four. At times throughout this movie, they do feel like a family, which should be the goal, given as the Fantastic Four is the first family of Marvel. So, while we're talking about that family, this is a great time to talk about the cast of the movie. Let's start with the casting that I was not the biggest fan of when it was announced, and a lot of people weren't, and I think it's still a miscast, which is Reed Richards, played by Pedro Pascal. Now, I do think it's important to try to separate the current online discourse around Pedro Pascal from his actual performance, whether it be his convenient anxiety groping of his co-stars if they're attractive, or that he's in seemingly every single movie that's been released every single weekend this year. That is something that leads to me personally being a little bit sick of Pedro Pascal. I'm sick of seeing him in everything, to be honest. And on top of that, I don't really think he looks like Reed Richards, which is kind of unfortunate when that's what you're going for. All that being said, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how Pedro portrayed the character. Now, I don't think it was masterful by any means. There's something about his voice that doesn't command the presence that it feels like Reed Richards should have. And for the love of God, I wish the dude would have just shaved his mustache. I mean, Reed Richards doesn't have a mustache. Just look at this picture I found where someone digitally removed the mustache. It still doesn't look exactly like Reed Richards, but it looks way better. And I wish the dude would have just shaved the freaking mustache. I think a lot of these kind of misplays of the character that I felt I would have noticed them a little bit less, because it would have looked a lot more like Mr. Fantastic. And already the performance was way better than I was expecting it to be for Mr. Fantastic. He's still a very talented actor. I mean, I thought he was great in The Last of Us, which there's only one season of, and I won't be told any differently.
I'm gonna be a dad.
that he's pretty good in the start of The Mandalorian. He's been praised for how he was in Game of Thrones. I mean, this dude is able to act very well. Just because he's in everything, though, is why people are starting to get this opinion that he can't act. I do think he acts very well, and he does have his moments throughout this movie where he has great acting throughout it. The final act is a great example of his great acting in this movie. On top of his acting, I do think Reed is the most compelling character in this story. Now, most of that comes down to writing, but overall, the character has a lot of flaws that they look to explore but don't really, and overall, it makes him the most interesting character in this movie as a whole. Reed has a line in this movie where he says he has to imagine the worst things in the world, the darkest things possible, so that he can figure out how to prevent them. This is a storyline that kind of is similar, like runs in parallel with Tony Stark in Stage 2 of the MCU, and I think is a very interesting way at looking at how the smartest man in the universe has to deal with the pressures of keeping his world and his family safe. These arcs and stories are very loosely touched on for the characters in this movie, and I think a lot of times character moments and story arcs were sacrificed on the altar of having a shortened runtime for this movie, and it's very noticeable, with this being one of the shortest MCU movies ever released. Now, moving on to Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, I personally really liked the casting of Vanessa Kirby as Invisible Woman, but honestly, I was a little disappointed by Sue Storm in this movie. I think a lot of that does come down to the writing, but I also think part of that is the lack of chemistry between Vanessa Kirby and Pedro Pascal as Reed and Sue, which is kind of ironic considering how handsy they've been in the build-up to this movie. I think she has some very strong moments in this movie, notably during the escape from Galactus scene, even though she really shouldn't have been there, but we'll get to that later. But overall, Sue Storm is kind of a mediocrely written character, and she comes off as quite boring in this movie, and I think a lot of that is at the fault of the writers, because Sue Storm should be a very fascinating character. It's a pretty consistent trend with these Fantastic Four movies that they seem to not be able to figure out how to make her interesting. Joseph Quinn's Johnny Storm is a great character that is probably one of the ones I wish we got more time developed with. Like I already said, a lot of character arcs are sacrificed on the altar of runtime, and I think Johnny Storm's might be the most present. There's a lot of different plot lines that they were going to pursue with Johnny Storm's character, it feels like, that seemingly got cut out or are just very undercooked in the movie as a whole. Now, I will unapologetically hate that Shia LaBeouf is the Silver Surfer instead of Norrin Radd. I don't care what anyone says. I will always unapologetically hate that. But at the end of the day, they committed to this drastic change, and that provides them with an opportunity to use Johnny and Shia LaBeouf's relationship, I guess, as the turning point in her story, which is, there's elements of that in this movie, but they're extremely undercooked and underdone, and it leads to multiple problems with the script later on. But by far the biggest disgrace in this movie is Shia LaBeouf and the writing subverting Johnny's big moment at the end of the movie with his sacrifice. But we'll get more into that later. But I really don't like that writing technique, and I feel like it has a lot of mistakes. Ebon Moss-Bachrach as the Thing, or Ben Grimm, has some interesting moments. I really liked him in those couple of moments, but he is horrifically underused. I mean, if we're talking about characters who clearly had stuff cut out, the Thing is the primary example of this. There's like 2 scenes in the movie where he returns to like the street he grew up in New York City, and there's some kind of like romance side plot developing that just goes nowhere. And I mean, I would assume that this is a result of the massive cuts made to this movie to shorten the runtime. I said Johnny Storm is probably the one I wish they did better. The Thing, if they had done anything at all, would have probably been that character. I thought that he was pretty good in the scenes he was in, but I wish he was utilized way more. And at the end of the day, I wish we could have gotten to see the Thing do some actual clobbering. Ralph Ineson is great casting as Galactus, and overall Galactus looks amazing in this movie. There are some moments in the third act that I think has some weird CGI floopiness, but other than that, most of the scenes Galactus is in look pretty good. I do wish he was like way bigger. I like the size of the Celestial that visits the Earth at the end of Eternals. That is a movie that came out. I know most of you probably forgot about it. At least the size of the Celestial in that movie is the size I would want Galactus. He should be huge because he's eating these planets. But as far as the actual character in the movie, they introduced this concept that Galactus is like a force of nature. He's not evil. So like Galactus eating your planet shouldn't be seen as like a supervillain trying to destroy the world, but more as like a massive earthquake or a hurricane. Galactus is moving through the universe because he has to, not because he's doing it out of some evil spitefulness in him. And while I love the concept of Galactus being this force of nature and the movie introducing that, they generally don't stick to this. Galactus is very human-like and super petty. I mean, he says he's gonna like make their baby watch the Earth be eaten in front of them. That's not how a force of nature works. That's how a supervillain works. So I do wish Galactus was more that force of nature. You know, you couldn't negotiate with, you couldn't do anything. It just is gonna keep moving forward and there's nothing you can do about it. But instead, they embrace this concept of him being petty or evil instead of the force of nature thing. I think that would have made the writing a bit more interesting and added a bit more depth and element to Galactus's character. So the plot of Fantastic Four is solid in its first act. Essentially, it's all about preparing for the birth of Franklin. During this, we get some great moments where we get to see the great chemistry that can be present between the family. There are moments where it's not there, but the moments where they're very strong. And this is also where we get to start to see some of Reed's character flaws. And by character flaws, I of course mean like intentionally written character flaws, not flaws with the character. Those are two very different things, although they sound the same. You know, these kind of character flaws are explored with how he like tries to baby-proof the world. He essentially solves crime, which that's not exactly a problem, but it starts to sow the elements for Reed being overly paranoid about the safety of his baby, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there are moments like Sue asks him to build the crib, but Reed wants to build the super baby scanner or whatever that thing is he builds to test Franklin's superpowers. And it's like, obviously the goal was for him to, she wanted him to build the crib, but he was way more focused on this certain thing. I don't know that he's necessarily wrong, but in the context of the movie, they seem to think it's a character flaw, so we'll just go with that. It's like he said, he has to imagine the darkest parts of the universe, figure out how to stop them. That's Reed's inherent flaw as a character and how he needs to overcome that. And this is explored in the first act of this movie, at least a little bit. Pretty loose, but it's there. I will say my main problem with this part of the movie is I wish that the, I guess, kind of exposition or rising action cause of the Silver Surfer coming to Earth was because of something the Fantastic Four did. You know, maybe it was because Sue was pregnant with the baby with the power of Cosmic that set off the alarms and it caused Silver Surfer to arrive. Would have helped, I think, this plot feel a little more smooth, but this is very much just like, okay, Silver Surfer's here because the script says so and the plot needs to start now so the movie can get going. Now, the second act of the movie is quite cool and looks amazing, but it's where a lot of the storytelling problems start to come in. The main problem with this movie, as I touched on earlier, is that there's absolutely no world in which Sue Storm should be going up to space with how pregnant she is, because she is very pregnant. I mean, so pregnant that when they arrive to Galactus's ship and he uses his super baby powers to induce labor onto Sue, I guess, because that happened. She, like, the baby comes out completely fine, no health problems, nothing. So that means she is very pregnant. And I don't understand why in the world Reed, Johnny, or the Thing would let her onto the spaceship. I understand maybe she would really want to go or something like that. Maybe she could sneak on. I don't know. But there's no world where these three characters, as they're shown throughout this whole movie, would ever let the safety of their nephew, or in Reed's case, his son, be compromised because Sue wants to go to space while super pregnant. You know, most of the third act of this movie is involved around not letting Franklin be sacrificed or saving Franklin. I guess it just didn't matter when Sue was pregnant. They were like, yep, you can go to space, no big deal. I'm sure nothing bad will ever happen. But hey, just gotta ignore that. Just don't think about it. It's a comic book movie. You know, it's supposed to be dumb. I don't know. What an insert horrible excuse for why a story sucks in a movie here. The main plot of this movie after this point, because with Sue there, Galactus is able to scan Franklin's presence and know that he has the power cosmic. So now there's an actual reasoning for why he needs the baby instead of just eating the Earth. Because it is kind of shown to us that, you know, the Silver Surfer had no idea about Franklin, and it wasn't until Sue arrived on the ship that this was detected. So this isn't a nitpick. This is literally the plot of the movie happening because of this really insane destruction of these characters that they would let her go to space while pregnant. Looking past that, because you have to, because the movie just looks past that, the chase scenes and everything on the ship of Galactus are pretty cool. I like it. I like how Herbie is. Herbie's my favorite character in this movie. Herbie is the GOAT. The chase scenes after are really good. The running through the wormhole, the black hole scene looks amazing, even though it kind of just ripped from Interstellar. But hey, at least it looks good. It doesn't look distractingly awful. I think there's a lot of really weird problems of like, how'd they get back to Earth so fast? They lost their worm Trump drive, and they didn't explain that at all. They just said some arbitrary buzzwords, and they were like, good enough. But overall, this scene looks really cool, and we do get that great moment with Vanessa Kirby where she is giving birth and she's yelling at Johnny, and she's like, you gotta go kill the Silver Surfer, and Johnny's like, kill her? And she's like, she's trying to take your nephew, kill her. So I think that was a really well acted moment from Vanessa Kirby. The pregnancy birth scene is pretty weird, but I guess sure. And the baby comes out completely fine. Looks very CGI floopy weird. Doesn't look good. This is probably the roughest CGI shot in the movie next to every Silver Surfer shot. Because we're at this point in the movie, I am going to talk about the Silver Surfer CGI a bit. In the trailer, it looked awful. All right, I don't want to paint around that anyway. It looked terrible. In the movie, it looks a little bit better, but overall, there's still a very hefty amount of uncanniness. I think a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that it is a humanoid and looks far more human than like Norrin Rad looks, where Norrin Rad almost just looks like a mannequin. She doesn't look bad by any means as far as the CGI goes, but it definitely isn't good. It's better than it's been for Marvel, which, hey, that's something. So returning to Earth is where we get kind of the beginning to Act 3. And this is where the story falls completely apart and becomes a mess. The character writing is a disaster, and it's just not great. Notably, Reed tells the world that Galactus offered to spare the Earth in exchange for their child. I don't think that this would happen. Maybe it would happen, but it really seems like it's a dumb move to tell the world, hey, we just have to give up this one singular thing and you all get to live. I don't really think it's something the smartest man in the world would do. Maybe someone, it would slip out or something. It would get leaked on suit cameras. Who knows? I don't think that this makes sense for Reed to do, but whatever. After this point, Reed comes up with the masterful plan to teleport the Earth. This is stupid for a multitude of reasons. So first of all, the justification is that the Earth is no different from an egg except for scale, which no, not true at all. First of all, it's not even the same shape. An egg is like, an oval type shape. The Earth is a sphere. That's already a difference, is scale. Next is density, mass, all this other stuff. Second of all, we see the teleporting scene earlier in this movie, the kind of setup, which is, I guess, so genius that they set this up early in the movie, And we see as Reed teleports the egg from one bridge to another bridge. There's no bridge for them to send the Earth to. They only have one side of the bridge. This isn't accounted for at any part in the movie. And I don't see this being the plan from the smartest man in the universe of we're just going to teleport the Earth. I think everyone would probably die. I've seen the meme everywhere. It is Patrick Star Bikini Bottom, like, we're doing the same thing.
We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else.
Then on top of this, Johnny somehow learning an entire alien language from like one translated sentence is kind of insane in such a short amount of time. So when she comes to Earth, Johnny confronts her and says, well, first off, she destroys all of the other bridges. So now there's only one bridge left for teleporting stuff. And Johnny says, you killed trillions of people, which she should really already know. But now because she's hearing them, even though she would have already heard them based off the whole arriving and heralding scene, she knows that they're like, oh no, I don't want to die. Johnny's like, you saved your planet for your life, but you still let all these other people to die, which is very true. She's like an accessory to extreme mass murder. She's like, oh no, and then storms off and flies off into space. Doesn't seem like it's that big an issue. I guess at the time it does end up having some pretty big plot problems later. We'll get to that. So now, because they only have one teleportation bridge, the plan is they're going to teleport Galactus instead of the Earth itself. Now Galactus arrives and he lands on the Earth and grabs a piece of the ground, hits a quick Kevin Bacon. If you know, you know. Now he's going to try to steal the baby on his own and eat the Earth. So it's at this point I'm going to point out that the Fantastic Four said conventional weapons don't work on Galactus. As Galactus is moving to grab Franklin, their big master plan is they're going to blind him with Johnny's fire. So Galactus is now blinded because of Johnny's fire. They swap the baby. Later in the movie, Reed uses a sharp stick to attack Galactus. I'm going to point this out. Fire and sharp sticks is kind of like step one in conventional weapons. I feel like we could have just nuked this dude and we probably would have got him, So they do this bait and switch with Franklin. And for whatever reason, Johnny, who can fly very fast, they've showed us that he can fly very fast, doesn't fly Franklin halfway around the world to keep him safe. He flies him like 2 blocks away to the giant building with a Fantastic Four logo on it. So sure enough, Galactus decides to scan the giant building with a Fantastic Four logo on it when he realizes the baby isn't in front of him anymore. Sure enough, finds the baby in the giant building with the logo on it. Galactus now has the baby, and he then stretches Reed not that far, and they're like, Reed's gonna die. So this is a massive limit put on Mr. Fantastic's powers. And I almost guarantee this is going to cause a problem in Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars. He's going to stretch further than this. And it's like, well, technically you showed us that he's going to die. And now it's at this point in the movie where Sue Storm begins to single-handedly shove Galactus back towards the black hole. Now, some have claimed this is a great scene showing the Fantastic Four working together to defeat Galactus. And it's just not. I would think the scene would work a little better if it was like they all use their powers in a certain way. Maybe Reed's tripping Galactus by stretching out. Who knows? And Johnny's blasting him with a fire blast. And the Thing is like punching him. And, you know, it doesn't have to be... Sue can be doing most of the work because she is the most powerful. But I wish they just show the Fantastic Four as a whole working together to shove Galactus towards this black hole. The most the Thing does is break some pillars because Sue was shoving him and then Galactus grabbed a building. Reed is saving the child, so that's fine, whatever. And then Johnny is there to pull a lever. That's not the team working together. That's Sue Storm doing all the work while everyone else is just like, yeah, you got it. Go team. And then at the same time, this completely screws with the power scaling. Because now either Sue Storm is completely stupid overpowered or Galactus is stupid weak. This is, I mean, Galactus should be like your Thanos level villain. Obviously, to an even greater extent than Thanos. You know, in an ideal world, Galactus is the big 10-year villain that multiple phases of the MCU build up to for them to defeat, and it takes the entire superhero roster to send Galactus away. They still can't even beat him. But no, in this one, Sue just literally shoves him on her own. I mean, this to me feels like Ant-Man beating up Kang in Quantum Mania. Like, you're just ruining a really cool big bad that could be a future big bad in Marvel, but it's like, nope, because now one character can beat him on her own. Great work with that. So now Sue is like dead on the ground, but Galactus needs to be one final push into the black hole, and Johnny's gonna have this heroic sacrifice. There's a great line. He says, tell Franklin Uncle Johnny loves him, because obviously he knows he's not coming back. He starts flying to knock him out of the way, knock Galactus into the black hole. In flies female Silver Surfer, and there's this really weird slow motion scene where she like knocks him out of the way with her surfboard and just flies in, takes Galactus in the portal with her. This character redemption story comes kind of out of nowhere. We have the one scene showing us of her like, I know I didn't want to kill trillions of people, but I did. Now I'm sad. And then she flies away. There's really nothing for why all of a sudden she should be deciding that the human race itself is more important to keep alive than any other race, because she let all these other people die. So this is like a complete character 180 for almost no reason. It's completely out of nowhere. Make the connection. Charlotte Ball sacrificed herself so her daughter could live. Make the connection that she sees the Fantastic Four fighting for their kid and it inspires her, or have it be a relationship with Johnny or anything. There needs to be more to the context of why she suddenly decided the human race is more important than any of these other, you know, alien races or anything that she has helped sacrifice to Galactus. It just doesn't make a lot of sense with the context of her character so far in this movie. It subverts a massive heroic moment for this character that I think the movie does do a decent job of making you kind of care about. Johnny doesn't sacrifice himself, and Sue is dead because she sacrificed herself.
But wait! There's more!
And then Franklin uses his god baby powers to resurrect Sue Storm. Bold move. This is going to cause a lot of problems later on, I would guess. You know, this is a god baby. Now, he can just bring people back to life. Good luck with that in the MCU. I'm sure it won't cause any problems.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
You better not have anyone die with god baby Franklin around, because it's cooked. Now, story's over. Overall, with this movie, like I said, more impressed by I thought it was. Probably somewhere between a 4 to 5 out of 10. I don't know. It's better than Superman. I think this might be a true 5 out of 10, and it makes movies I've also said are 5 out of 10, whether it be like Thunderbolts or Superman. They just get worse as other stuff comes out. I think that there's elements of good storytelling. I really like that this movie was shot with a style. You know, it feels like there was a director on it, not just like a guy there directing. Two very different things. Matt Shackman shot a couple episodes of WandaVision. He might have directed the whole show. I can't remember, but that also felt like it had a style to it. You know, the retro 60s aesthetic, I think, does help a lot of parts in this movie, and it does feel unique. It doesn't just feel like scenes happening in an extent. It feels like scenes happening in a certain way. Like WandaVision, also the ending sucks. But I mean, Matt Shackman's probably the best director at this point still around in the MCU, so good for him. But the best Fantastic Four movie is still The Incredibles. The best coming of Galactus story adaptation is Lego Marvel Superheroes. I'll probably play that live on the Final Take Live YouTube channel, whatever, just having some fun with it. And that's about all I had to say with Fantastic Four. So yeah, thanks for watching.